The string quartet plays something light, airy, completely oblivious. White roses climb the trellis, perfect and false. My daughter, my beautiful girl, is a dream in lace, her eyes shining, taking the arm of the man she chose. This is the moment. The culmination of everything. A lifetime poured into this one perfect day. Then his shadow falls across the aisle. Not just any shadow, but his. The man who stood beside me for 30 years, built a life with me, raised that girl walking down the aisle.
He's holding something.
Not a handkerchief for tears, not a program. A long, official-looking envelope. He reaches me just as the quartet swells. The music muffles the small rip of the paper tearing.
He doesn't speak.
Just looks at me with eyes that are suddenly, terrifyingly empty. He presses the envelope into my hand. It's heavy.
Cold.
Like a stone dropped into the clear water of the moment. My fingers tremble around the edge. The ink is sharp, official. Divorce papers.
Served.
Here.
Now.
At our daughter's wedding. The world narrows to that one horrifying word on the page, the delicate lace of my daughter's dress blurring at the edges of my vision. The white roses seem to shriek silently. The air catches in my lungs. This is it. The perfect day shattering into a million sharp pieces. And he just stands there, a polite, terrible stranger in a tailored suit. If this story hits you, if you've ever felt blindsided when life seemed perfect, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. It really does. For 30 years, my life was a comfortable house. For walls, a solid roof, predictable rooms. There were arguments, sure, leaks in the roof, sometimes noisy neighbors. But it was ours. Built brick by brick, mortgage payment by mortgage payment, memory by memory. He worked, building his business from nothing into something substantial. I made the house a home. I managed the household, raised our daughter, was the silent partner in his success, the one who kept the foundation strong. We had family dinners, scraped knees, graduations, quiet nights on the couch. We were a unit, a team. That's what I told myself. That's what I believed. We weren't demonstrative. No grand gestures or public displays. Our love was quiet, rooted in routine, shared history, mutual respect.
Or what I thought was mutual respect.
He was often preoccupied with work, long hours, phone calls at all hours. I understood. Building something big required sacrifice. My sacrifice was time, his presence, sometimes my own ambitions. But it was for us. For our daughter's future, for our secure retirement, for days like this wedding. This wedding. We'd planned it for over a year. Every detail meticulously chosen. My daughter deserved it. She was the best of us, bright, kind, ambitious. Watching her grow up, seeing her find her person, felt like the ultimate reward for all those years of quiet dedication. The months leading up to the wedding had been hectic, a blur of florist appointments, cake tastings, dress fittings, seating charts. We were both stressed, but in the normal way that comes with organizing a huge event. We talked about the guest list, the budget, the weather forecast. There was no distance I hadn't grown used to, no tension that felt unusual. He seemed maybe a little more distant than usual, more withdrawn, but I attributed it to work pressure, wedding stress. Men handle stress differently, I told myself. He was just being his usual, quiet self. Looking back now, it's like watching a film where you know the ending. You see the subtle signs, the foreshadowing you missed the first time. The way he avoided certain questions about finances. The sudden short temper about trivial things. The way his phone was always face down. But in the moment, it was just life. Just the normal bumps in the road of a long marriage. He even seemed excited about the wedding.
Proud.
We walked through the venue together just weeks before, him pointing out how good the business had been that quarter, how we could comfortably afford everything our daughter wanted. He talked about our future, about traveling after retirement, about enjoying the fruits of our labor. It felt solid.
Real.
So when he stood there, holding that envelope in the middle of everything we had created and celebrated, it didn't just feel like a surprise. It felt like a violation. An invasion. A bomb detonating in the heart of the most sacred day. It wasn't just cruel. It was a calculated, public act of destruction. He didn't want a quiet conversation. He wanted a spectacle. He wanted to dismantle my life in front of everyone who mattered to me. The guests are whispers. Confused glances. My sister gasps, covering her mouth. My daughter turns, her smile faltering, her eyes questioning. She sees the envelope. She sees his face. She sees mine. The music plays on, a cruel soundtrack to the implosion. I don't remember much of the next few minutes. Just a ringing in my ears, the paper shaking in my hand, the sudden, awful chill in the air despite the warmth of the day. Someone takes my arm, guides me gently away. My daughter is crying, asking what's happening.
He's gone.
Just vanished from the spot where he'd stood, leaving the wreckage behind. The wedding continued somehow. A phantom limb of a celebration. My daughter, resilient and brave, held it together for the ceremony, for her new husband. But the joy was poisoned. Every smile felt forced, every laugh hollow. I sat through the reception in a daze, the envelope clutched on my lap under the tablecloth. People tried to talk to me, offer condolences, ask hushed questions. I couldn't form coherent sentences. My husband of 30 years had chosen the moment our daughter started her new life to end mine. The papers were clear, ruthless. Standard forms, but the intent was venomous. He was filing immediately, citing irreconcilable differences. There was a proposed settlement, a pittance, barely enough to cover basic living expenses, let alone the life I had built, the future I had expected. His lawyer's letter attached was cold, efficient, outlining the terms as if I were a stranger, an obstacle to be removed quickly and cheaply. It listed assets I barely recognized, valuing them at suspiciously low numbers. It mentioned his business, his income, his investments. Nothing was ours. It was all his. Back in the empty house, after the last guest had gone and my daughter and her husband had left for their honeymoon, the silence was deafening. The house felt foreign. The furniture, the paintings, the familiar scent of years lived within these walls. It all felt like a stage setting for a play that had just ended in tragedy. I walked through the rooms, touching things, trying to find a trace of the man I thought I knew, the life I thought was real. There was nothing, just the cold, hard reality of the legal documents on the kitchen table. My first calls were to lawyers. It was humiliating. Explaining what happened, the wedding, the timing. Most of them listened patiently, their voices laced with pity or polite skepticism. They looked at the proposed settlement figures, nodded, and spoke in practical terms.
It's common, they said.
Men hide assets. It's hard to prove. Community property laws vary. It will be expensive. They talked about mediation negotiation. Settle quickly, they advised. Cut your losses. He's clearly planned this. He has the upper hand. It felt like drowning. Every conversation pulled me deeper under. The man who had shared my bed, my dreams, my family, was systematically trying to strip me bare. He knew where I was vulnerable. He knew I hadn't been involved in the day-to-day finances of his business. He knew I trusted him completely. And he'd used that trust as a weapon. His lawyer sent more letters. Demands for information. Insistence on rapid timelines. The tone was aggressive, dismissive. They wanted financial disclosures, but hinted that any attempt to investigate his business accounts would be met with fierce opposition. It was a clear message: don't fight this. You can't win. I felt a despair settling into my bones. A cold, heavy weight. How could I fight? I had no access to his real financial records. I had no independent wealth. My credit cards were linked to our joint accounts, which he had likely already started draining or freezing. I was adrift, without a compass, in a storm I hadn't seen coming. The shame was almost unbearable. Friends didn't know what to say. Some offered awkward sympathy. Others whispered behind my back. The story of the wedding day's spectacle spread like wildfire. I felt exposed, raw, judged. Not just for the divorce, but for the sheer, public humiliation of it. How could I have been so blind? How could I have lived with someone for so long and not known they were capable of this? Sleep offered no escape. I'd wake up in a cold sweat. The image of the envelope burned into my mind. The quiet house felt like a cage. Every object a reminder of a lie. The comfortable chair he sat in, the coffee mug he used, the empty space beside me in the bed. I tried to think, to remember details. Anything. Had he ever said anything? Left anything out? Was there a name I'd heard? A trip he'd taken that seemed odd? My mind was a jumble of normal memories. 30 years of routine. It was like trying to find a single grain of sand on a beach. One lawyer, an older woman with kind eyes but a weary slump to her shoulders, looked through the initial documents. She sighed. "He's being clever," she said softly. "Structuring things to look less valuable on paper. Happens all the time. Unless we can find something. A trail he left. It's going to be an uphill battle." A very expensive 1 inch. She looked at my face, the fear and exhaustion etched there. "Frankly," she continued, her voice gentle, "it might be easier, less damaging, to negotiate the best terms you can now. Prolonging this fight against someone this prepared, it can break you." Her words were practical, logical. They were also a death sentence to any hope of fairness. Settle now meant accepting his terms. Accepting being left with almost nothing after a lifetime of contribution. It meant letting him win completely, cementing his betrayal with financial ruin. The thought of giving up tasted like ash. But the mountain felt unclimbable. He had the resources, the lawyers, the head start. I had nothing but a broken heart and an empty bank account. Then something shifted. It wasn't a sudden revelation, more like a slow-burning fuse ignited by a tiny spark of defiance. I was sitting in the quiet house, feeling utterly defeated, staring at the wedding photos on my laptop. My daughter, so beautiful, so happy, right before. I saw a picture of us, the three of us, standing together just minutes before the ceremony. His arm around my waist, a practiced smile on his face. And in that smile, for the first time, I saw not affection, but calculation. Cold, hard planning. He didn't just serve me papers on the wedding day to be cruel. He did it to create maximum shock and disruption. To destabilize me completely. To make me so emotionally devastated and publicly humiliated that I wouldn't be able to think straight, wouldn't be able to fight back effectively. He wanted me to crumble, to sign anything just to make it stop. And in that realization, a cold, hard knot formed in my stomach. Not of fear this time, but of something else. Fury. He hadn't just betrayed me. He had underestimated me. He thought my love, my trust, my years of dedication made me weak. He thought I would just wilt. That thought changed everything. The shame didn't vanish, but it was now mixed with a potent, bitter determination. I wouldn't crumble. I wouldn't make it easy for him. He wanted a fight? I would give him one. Not an emotional one. Not a messy, desperate plea for fairness. A cold, strategic war. I went back to my list of lawyers. I didn't call the sympathetic ones, or the weary ones. I searched for names associated with complex financial litigation, with uncovering hidden assets. I looked for lawyers known for being aggressive, relentless. I needed a weapon. I found her name on a list of top forensic divorce attorneys. Sarah Jensen. Her website was stark, professional. No smiling photos, just a list of credentials and case summaries. They weren't about heartbroken spouses. They were about untangling corporate structures, following money trails across borders, finding the hidden compartments in seemingly solid financial walls. She sounded like the kind of lawyer other lawyers were afraid of. Getting an appointment wasn't easy. Her office was minimal, high-tech, on the top floor of a gleaming downtown tower. When I finally sat across from her, she didn't offer pity. Her eyes were sharp, analytical. She listened without interruption as I recounted the story, starting with the wedding day. When I finished, the silence hung in the air. Then she spoke. Her voice was quiet, calm, completely devoid of emotion. "He planned this," she stated, not asked. The timing, the method. It's designed to achieve maximum leverage. Public humiliation breaks down resolve. Cutting off financial access creates immediate panic. Standard tactics. Effective against someone unprepared. She looked at the papers he'd served. The settlement offer is insulting, obviously, based on declared assets, which means he's hiding the real picture. She leaned forward slightly. Finding hidden assets isn't magic. It's meticulous, painstaking work. It requires time, resources, expertise, and usually a starting point. A hint. Something he overlooked. I felt that familiar despair creep back in. I don't have a hint, I said, my voice small. I don't know where to even look. She steepled her fingers. Then we start everywhere. We look at his business financials for the last 5 years. We look at personal accounts, credit cards, tax returns, investment statements. We look for anomalies. Unexpected transfers. Companies you've never heard of. Property transactions. Listen, Mrs. Miller, she said, using my married name, which suddenly felt alien. This will be expensive. It will be invasive. It will consume your life. And there's no guarantee we'll find anything conclusive. He may be very good at this. It was the same warning I'd heard before, but coming from her, it sounded different. Not like a reason to give up, but like a challenge. Like the stakes being laid bare. I understand, I said, my voice stronger than I expected. I don't care how hard it is. I don't care how long it takes. He did this to me. He did this to our daughter on her wedding day. He tried to break me. I won't let him get away with it. I want you to find everything. Every single hidden penny. Whatever it takes. Her expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. Respect? Interest? She nodded slowly. All right, she said. We'll start the process. But be prepared. This is going to be a long, ugly fight. She wasn't wrong. The next few months were a living hell. Sarah's team was thorough, relentless, and expensive. Every request for documentation from our side was met with resistance, delays, and obfuscation from his lawyers. They fought tooth and nail against providing detailed business records, claiming privacy, proprietary information, burden of proof. Meanwhile, my own financial situation became dire. My access to funds was severely restricted. I had to borrow money from my sister to pay for groceries, for basic necessities. It was humiliating. He was squeezing me, trying to starve me into submission. His lawyer sent increasingly confident letters, pushing for a quick settlement based on his declared assets. The numbers were still insultingly low. They were clearly trying to leverage my desperation. Sarah warned me this would happen. He's using financial warfare, she explained. He knows you're vulnerable. Every delay, every legal maneuver costs you money and increases your stress. He's banking on you cracking. There were days I felt myself teetering on the edge. The constant pressure, the endless paperwork, the feeling of powerlessness. I was isolated. My daughter was caught in the middle, heartbroken and confused by her father's actions, trying to maintain a relationship with both of us while navigating her new marriage. She asked if I could just settle. End the pain. It broke my heart that my fight was causing her pain, but how could I explain that settling would mean validating his cruelty? That it wasn't just about the money anymore. Sarah's team dug deeper. They subpoenaed bank records, tax filings, corporate documents. It was like pulling teeth. Every step forward felt tiny, insignificant against the wall of resistance he had built. They found offshore accounts, shell corporations, complex ownership structures. But proving his direct connection to them, proving they were assets hidden from me and not legitimate business dealings, was the challenge. His lawyers had an explanation for everything, a paper trail designed to look innocent. It's masterful work, Sarah admitted one weary afternoon in her office, surrounded by stacks of paper. He's been planning this for a long time. There are layers upon layers. The cost was astronomical. I was draining my sister's savings, taking out loans against what little independent property I had left. I lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was making a terrible mistake. Was I throwing good money after bad? Was I letting pride and anger blind me? Was he right? Was I already broken? Just when the darkness felt deepest, when I was seriously contemplating calling Sarah and telling her to try and salvage whatever she could, something happened. Not a smoking gun, not yet, but a shift. Sarah's lead investigator, a quiet woman named Maria who seemed to exist solely on coffee and spreadsheets, found something. It wasn't in the official records. It was buried in a box of old, disorganized files he had been compelled to turn over, a box his lawyers likely hadn't even bothered to go through properly, dismissing it as irrelevant personal effects. It was a series of emails, encrypted, seemingly innocuous, discussing Project Shamrock and the Green Initiative with people I didn't recognize. The dates went back 5 years. Initially, Maria thought it might be related to environmental projects, but the language was coded. The numbers didn't align with anything in the declared business financials. Sarah called me in. She didn't look triumphant, just focused. "Maria found these," she said, sliding the printed emails across her desk. "We've been working with a specialist to decrypt and analyze them. We think Shamrock isn't a project. We think it's an investment vehicle. And Green Initiative isn't about the environment. We think it's about money laundering." My blood ran cold. Money laundering? The man I lived with for 30 years. "The emails discuss large sums," Sarah continued, her voice low. "Transfers, shell corporations, jurisdictions known for financial secrecy. It's complex." But Maria cross-referenced some of the names and dates with flight records, hotel bookings, even a few old scan documents we found. "We have a preliminary theory. We believe your husband has been systematically siphoning off large portions of his business profits for years, running them through a complex international network and hiding them in offshore accounts that are not in his name, but controlled through nominee directors and trusts." She paused, letting the weight of the words sink in. "These aren't just undeclared assets, Mrs. Miller. If we can prove this, this is potentially criminal." Criminal. The word hung in the air. It wasn't just about divorce anymore. It was about fraud, about potentially illegal activity. The fear I had felt before was different now. It was sharper, colder. But it was also mixed with something else. A grim satisfaction. He hadn't just been planning to leave me. He'd been building a secret empire on a foundation of lies, an empire I had unknowingly supported for years. "How much?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Sarah looked at the spreadsheets Maria had compiled. Based on the figures in these emails and estimated growth conservatively, several times the declared value of his entire business. My head reeled. Several times. While he was offering me crumbs. While he was trying to leave me destitute. This was it. The turning point. This wasn't just about getting a fair divorce settlement anymore. It was about exposing the truth. About justice. About holding him accountable not just for the betrayal of our marriage, but for the scale of his deception. There was no going back. No settling. He had started a war, and I finally had a weapon. "All right," I said, my voice gaining strength. "What do we do?" Sarah's eyes, for the first time, held a hint of grim determination that mirrored my own. "We use this. We don't show our hand yet. We continue discovery, act like we're still just fighting over the declared assets. Let his lawyers stay confident, aggressive. We build our case in the background. We connect all the dots. We wait for the right moment. And then, we deploy." The waiting was agonizing. Every court date felt like a performance. His lawyers, smug and condescending, presented their case based on his falsified financials. He sat across the room, looking bored, occasionally conferring with his counsel, never meeting my eyes. I had to sit there, listen to them lowball my worth, minimize my contribution, lie about his wealth, knowing what I knew. It took every ounce of strength to maintain a calm facade, to not scream the truth across the courtroom. Sarah and her team worked tirelessly. They brought in forensic accountants, international legal experts, former financial crime investigators. They followed every thread from those initial emails, tracing the money through layers of shell corporations, across borders, into accounts with deliberately misleading names. It was a labyrinth, designed to be impenetrable. But Sarah's team was relentless. The cost continued to mount. I was living on borrowed money, the anxiety a constant companion. But underneath the fear, a core of cold resolve had hardened. I saw Sarah's invoices not as expenses, but as investments in justice. Every dollar was a brick in the wall I was building around him. We approached the final settlement hearing. This was it. The point where the judge would either sign off on a mediated agreement or set a trial date. His lawyers were pushing hard for mediation. They wanted this over, presumably confident they had worn me down and proven their case based on the declared assets. They presented a slightly increased offer, still laughably low, framing it as generous. "They have no idea," Sarah said the day before the hearing, a rare smile playing on her lips. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a predator who knew the trap was set. The mediation room was sterile, impersonal. A long table, chairs, boxes of files. My ex-husband sat on one side with his two lawyers, looking confident, almost bored. I sat on the other side with Sarah and Maria. The mediator, a weary-looking man who had probably seen every kind of marital ugliness, sat at the head of the table, trying to project an air of calm neutrality. His lead lawyer started, rehashing the numbers, my alleged lack of contribution to the business, the fairness of their proposed settlement. He spoke as if I wasn't even there, addressing the mediator and Sarah. It was dismissive, arrogant. I felt a familiar surge of anger, but I kept my face blank. When he finished, the mediator turned to Sarah. "Ms. Jensen?" Sarah nodded. She didn't shuffle papers. She didn't launch into a lengthy preamble. She simply opened a folder and placed a single document on the table, sliding it towards the mediator first. Then she slid copies to his lawyers. She did not slide one to my ex-husband. Not yet. "We've reviewed Mr. Miller's declared assets," Sarah began, her voice calm, clear, cutting through the stale air of the room. "And we find them incomplete." His lawyers exchanged glances, a flicker of annoyance on their faces. They'd clearly expected this, the usual arguments about asset valuation. "For the past 8 months," Sarah continued, her gaze fixed on his lead lawyer, "we have conducted our own investigation into Mr. Miller's financial activities, specifically focusing on a pattern of undeclared income and asset concealment dating back approximately 5 years. The lawyer's smirk faltered slightly. My ex-husband still looked bored, but his eyes darted between Sarah and his counsel. "Our investigation," Sarah said, her voice gaining a quiet intensity, utilizing forensic accounting, international legal expertise, and decrypted communications, indicates that Mr. Miller has systematically diverted substantial sums from his business through a network of offshore entities and trusts, accounts not held in his name, specifically for the purpose of concealing them. His lawyer started to interrupt, a blustering denial forming on his lips. "Objection. This is speculative nonsense. Unsubstantiated dash." Sarah held up a hand, stopping him cold. "It is anything but unsubstantiated." She turned slightly, gesturing to Maria, who placed several thick binders on the table. They were filled with documents, charts, diagrams. "Exhibit A," Sarah announced, her voice ringing with authority, "is a detailed tracing of funds from Mr. Miller's business accounts to a series of shell corporations in the Cayman Islands, the British Virgin Islands, and Luxembourg. Exhibit B provides decrypted emails detailing the structure and purpose of these transfers, dating back to the initiation of Project Shamrock." She finally turned to my ex-husband. His face had gone utterly white. The smugness was gone, replaced by a look of sheer, gut-wrenching terror. He stared at the binders, then at Sarah, then at me. His eyes were wide, panicked. "Exhibit C," Sarah continued, her voice now cold, hard, and utterly devastating, details the estimated current value of the assets held within these concealed structures. Based on conservative projections and corroborating evidence from international sources, we estimate these assets to be in excess of. She paused, letting the number hang in the air. $50 million. $50 million. The number was staggering. An order of magnitude beyond anything he had ever declared, anything I had ever suspected. It wasn't just hidden money. It was a fortune built on deception. The room was silent. His lawyers were scrambling, flipping through the binders Sarah had provided, their faces a mixture of shock and horror. They clearly hadn't known. He hadn't just hidden his assets from me. He'd hidden the true scale of them from his own legal team. My ex-husband looked like he might be sick. He had been so confident, so cruel, so certain of his victory. He thought he had planned for everything, covered every angle. But he hadn't planned for this. He hadn't expected me to find a lawyer who could peel back the layers of his deceit, who could follow the invisible trails he thought were erased. He hadn't expected me to fight with the same ruthlessness he had shown. Furthermore, Sarah added, delivering the final blow, the nature of these transfers and the associated communications raise serious questions regarding potential financial crimes, including money laundering and tax evasion. We have already taken steps to notify relevant authorities. That's when he broke. He lunged forward slightly, his voice a hoarse whisper. You can't. You wouldn't. Sarah looked at him, her face impassive. We can. And we have. Your choice to serve Mrs. Miller divorce papers in the manner and timing you did, Mr. Miller, showed a profound lack of judgment and respect. Your subsequent attempts to conceal assets and leave her destitute were not only contemptible, but appear to have exposed you to significant legal jeopardy, far beyond the scope of this divorce. She turned back to the mediator, her tone shifting from indictment back to legal formality. Given this new information, which was deliberately withheld by Mr. Miller during discovery, we find the previous settlement offer inadequate. We are now seeking a division of assets that reflects the true marital estate, including all concealed funds, as well as substantial compensation for the emotional distress and financial hardship Mr. Miller intentionally inflicted upon my client. We are prepared to proceed to trial and use all available evidence to pursue a just outcome, both in this court and potentially in criminal proceedings, should Mr. Miller not agree to a settlement that is not only fair, but recognizes the extraordinary nature of his deception. The air in the room crackled with the weight of the revelation. He was cornered. The man who had tried to destroy me with a piece of paper on the happiest day of my life was now facing the loss of everything: his fortune, his freedom, his carefully constructed reputation. He had been so focused on winning the divorce that he hadn't considered the possibility of losing everything else. His plan hadn't just failed, it had catastrophically backfired. He hadn't just been blindsided, he'd been buried under the weight of his own secrets, secrets that I, the wife he thought he could easily discard, had helped uncover. The negotiation that followed wasn't really a negotiation. It was a capitulation. His lawyers, clearly panicked and furious at their client, were now solely focused on mitigating the potential criminal exposure. The divorce settlement became secondary, a necessary cost to potentially avoid prison and the complete dismantling of his business. I didn't feel joy. Not exactly. It was a cold, hard satisfaction. A sense of balance being restored, not by karma or fate, but by deliberate action. He had played a cruel game, and he had lost spectacularly. The final settlement was complex, involving the disentangling of his offshore structures, the transfer of significant assets, properties, and a substantial portion of his legitimate business value. It was far more than I would have received in a standard divorce, even with the declared assets. It was more than I had ever imagined possessing. The woman he had tried to leave with nothing was now financially secure for life, thanks to the fortune he had tried so hard to hide. Walking out of that mediation room was different from walking out of the wedding venue. Then I was broken, humiliated, lost. Now I was exhausted, emotionally drained, but standing on my own 2 feet. I had faced the worst he could do, and I had not only survived, I had emerged stronger. The aftermath wasn't a neat, happy ending. Money doesn't erase 30 years of shared life, or the trauma of betrayal. My relationship with my daughter needed time and healing. She was relieved the legal battle was over, but heartbroken by the truth about her father. We navigated it together, slowly rebuilding trust, finding a new dynamic based on honesty and shared resilience. My house felt different now. It wasn't just a house anymore, it was my house. Every room was a testament to surviving the storm. I started making changes, small ones at first, then larger ones. Redecorating, rearranging, making it a reflection of who I was now, not who I had been in the shadow of his life. The financial security was freeing, but it came with a heavy price tag of emotional baggage. I had to learn to trust my own judgment again, to rely on myself. The anger faded, replaced by a quiet understanding of human capacity for both profound love and breathtaking cruelty. He faced consequences beyond the divorce settlement, though the details are private. But the financial blow was immense, the public humiliation within his business circles was significant, and the constant threat of further legal action hung over him. He lost what he valued most: control, reputation, and the bulk of the fortune he had risked everything to hide. I didn't pursue the criminal charges fully. Sarah advised me that my victory in the divorce settlement, the sheer amount recovered, was a form of justice in itself, and the process of criminal prosecution would be lengthy, invasive, and unlikely to yield further financial gain. The goal had been achieved: expose his deceit and secure my future. His public downfall and financial ruin were sufficient retribution for me. Life is quieter now, simpler in some ways, despite the complexity of managing the new reality. I travel. I pursue interests I put on hold for decades. I spend time with my daughter, building a new kind of closeness. The scar from the wedding day is still there, a faint ache, a reminder of how quickly everything can change. But it's not a wound that defines me. He tried to serve me my ending on a silver platter of public shame. But he didn't realize that sometimes, when you hit rock bottom, you find the strength to build a new foundation, stronger and more resilient than the old one ever was. He thought he was ending my story. He was just clearing the way for me to write my own. And that, in the end, was a victory far bigger than any sum of money. It was the reclamation of myself. If you've ever felt like your life was dismantled, only to find the strength to build it anew, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. And thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these stories to life.